Record.
What is the French view on the French Revolution?
What's what?
Like, what would be their view on it? Like, if they are teaching?
Well, actually, it would probably depend on. Please don't go to the beginning. No. It would depend on, I guess, what part of France or what the teacher thought. I mean, I don't know. It's an excellent question. If I find anybody from France, I'll ask. If I get a textbook from France, I'll share that question. You have to think that at the end of the day, they're pleased with it because they have, they don't have a monarchy anymore. So that's always a good thing. All right. Oh, that's a lovely little record. Here we go. The birth of France. I guess that's why it's in a baby carriage. All right. Yes. Whoops. My wheel is stuck. The French Revolution. The second great revolution we're going to speak of. Notice we go America, then we go France, the ones people are familiar with, and then we're not going to be familiar. All right. Peasant suffering represents a major cause of the French Revolution. Yes, it does. Remember the king before this. This is Louis XVI. Louis XIV is the one who built Versailles, who built the world's largest state-sponsored army, who lived the high life, loved being king. And he did some other things, like he invested in mining and industry and all those things. But as you all know, exploration and colonization is expensive. Living the king's life, having your entourage is expensive. Building a multi-hundred-room palace is expensive. And you know that there are people in France with money, but when we look further into this discussion today, you'll understand some of the problems and why the peasants were willing to go along with the people who call for revolution. Remember, while we're going through this, raise your virtual hands if you have any questions. Peasants lost half of their income to nobles tied to the church and taxes to the king, and something called the taille, which is a tax on land. So half of their income was, so basically 50% of their income is taxed off the top, which wouldn't be that big a deal if, others, and this is going to be a term that should sound familiar if you've been watching the news the last 4, 5, 8 years, if others just paid their fair share. Well, I guess that would mean you'd be watching the news when you were 6 or 7. I keep forgetting I have freshmen. Okay. Not a slap in the face, just you're not my upper what? French nobles were exempted from paying taxes, and they successfully resisted all attempts to reform the tax system. Well, why wouldn't you? Why would you fix something as far as you're concerned ain't broke? So the nobles are exempt. I do not know the history behind it, so don't ask. But if I had to hypothesize, it may have been one of the things that the monarchy did to keep the nobles from being a pain in the behind, to keep them from being a pain and a nuisance. I'll tell you what, save all your money to spend on what you want. I'm not going to tax you. All right. Oh, my wheel's broken. The clicker's stuck.
I think it's hovering over.
No, the clicker's stuck. Yay, technology. Where'd it go? Oh, they can still see it, so I'm going to talk to them. You guys just have to listen.
It's not.
All right.
You were hovering, and it would have shown.
Nobles, 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 nobles. Okay. All right. Grain. One of the things that came over from the old world to the new world. Yay, Columbian Exchange. Grain shortages led to sharp increases in the price of bread, which is a major cause of discontent in France because the bread is banging. The bread smacks. French bread, man. Well, bread, period. If it's good. Italian bread, Portuguese rolls, some good naan. That's some good stuff.
The garlic bite.
The guard bites from where? The Lima Grill. Okay. The only thing I've ever eaten at the Lima Grill that I liked was their Krispy Kreme sundae, which is just a warm glazed donut with a big glob of vanilla ice cream and hot fudge on top. Yeah. Huh?
That sounds so bread is bussin'.
What is bussin'? That's a new word. What is bussin'?
I thought you knew all the new slang.
Thanks,
Bussin',
man.
It's just like it's like it's fire. It's really
Slaps.
good.
Fire is
Whatever.
for lyrics, man.
Not necessarily.
Oh, come on. It's like,
Be like, yo,
bars
that
are
food is
Come on.
fire.
All right.
Wow, this food is fire.
Really?
Yeah.
So there's like, okay. All right.
All kind of flows together.
Okay. Everything conspires to represent peer. Again, France critical. The lack of bread is terrible. Accounts are wrong. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Basically, things are going bad. I already said that. Okay. Louis the 15th. Louis the 16th. Well, they should look the same because they're related. Oh, Louis the 16th has never said no to a meal. That's what it looks like right there. That's true. All right. Yeah, he does. Yeah. All right. He's got some jowls going there. Okay. But again, all that accoutrement, expensive. But it's good to be the king. The portrait itself being painted, expensive. What? Purple's a sign of royalty. Yes. All right. The absolutist government created by Louis XIV continued under the 15th and the 16th. It failed to solve France's financial problems. You might be able. It's not what you might see now. You might be able to say they didn't want to fix the financial problems completely, because we all have those moments in life when we know what we have to do, and we know it's not going to be popular, and we know it's going to cause people to really not like us either. We think it'll be forever. Most people it's short term. Some people forever, but if that's the case, then you're better off without them because they're petty and what's the word? Trifling. But we don't want to do it because we just want things to be easy. I'm just going to look the other way. I'm going to ignore it. It'll go away. And then the quarter ends and you realize that work has not gone away. Louis XV and XVI, the Sun King successors, were incompetent and content merely to imitate their great predecessors' outward show of power. The pomp and magnificence remained. Finance masters soon became expert swindlers, cheating and extorting on a great scale. Okay. The peasants worked till they dropped, and citizens were forced to pay huge taxes. When your only revenue is the bottom rung of your ladder, you're going to work them to death. And they're going to get unhappy if they don't have their needs met. This hasn't changed. Louis XIV, we've spoken about him a little bit. The cost of the 7 Years' War and the American Revolution led to, it ate up half of the nation's annual revenue just in paying those two things off. The rest of it has to run France now and trying to get it to move forward. So half the money's chewed up just in previous endeavors. He ruled for, 72 years? Oh, yeah, because he was 10. Or no. Peter the Great was 10. He was 8? Yeah. All right. Now, see, he doesn't look so chunky there. It must be young Louis. Yep. And his wife, the Austrian Marie Antoinette, were particularly unpopular and frivolous. What's wrong with her face?
She looks like she's a saint.
All the kings marry these ugly women. I don't get it.
You ever see like Men in Black? It's like the little alien, like the one with the little head with the normal body. That's what I get.
He's a massive.
Just the hair.
That the hair makes it. No, the hair makes. Look,
It's like
all right, but when you pull the hair up, a couple of things. One, what's attractive is subjective. So what we know now, Lucas, is that what you don't find attractive. No. But what people think is attractive is subjective. It's not the same with everybody. Two, remember, most marriages, if you're a royal, are political marriages, not love marriages. Like there are agenda in these marriages. So he may or may not even have wanted to marry her, but she's the granddaughter of Maria Theresa, or the Queen of Austria. So it would be good to marry her, so that you get the Austrians and then eventually the Austro-Hungarian Empire to be buds, or at least not hate each other. Yeah,
was Austria like good? Like was it powerful?
powerful enough. Yeah.
Because like right now it's not that powerful.
Well, right now it doesn't need. It has its own thing. It's a banking center. All right, and well, if you look at the nations that do become global powers, what's the one advantage they have over Austria? What's Austria's greatest disadvantage to becoming a global power?
I have no idea.
What, Sam?
Landlocked.
It's landlocked. It's in the middle of Europe, so it's very difficult to go sail, and you got to ask for permission. Like, who is it? I think Bolivia. Is it Bolivia? Is landlocked, and Peru actually gave them free access to the ocean, or something like in South America. So it's tough if you're a landlocked country to develop greatness, to develop an overseas empire when you have no way to get. Your boats are lake bound.
Why did they like choose that? Why didn't they just like take over an ocean?
Because that's where they settle. That's where their people are. Most countries exist because that's where the culture is. That's where the people are.
Oh, can't people expand?
Okay, but what are we learning about conquest? Yeah, it doesn't end well. Louis XVI's tax reforms forced the king to call the Estates General is France's parliament, France's Congress. So the Estates General is their legislative body. Remember, this is the body that Louis XIV never called. 72 years King of France, never called the States General. Ever. Like, never, ever. So I guess if you like having a job with nothing to do, join the States General.
Did you get paid?
I'm sure.
Free money?
This is, and if you can't see it, I'm sorry, but this is a pyramid. Oh, you can see it there, showing you the social status breakdown of France at the dawn of the French Revolution. At the top of the ladder, and the relative populations, the numbers. At the top of the ladder is the first estate. That's the clergy. Should not surprise anybody. Post-Enlightenment, post-Renaissance, post-Middle Ages, that the church is the top of the social order. Again, that's context. There's 139 bishops, 25,000 monks. That's a lot of monks. 40,000 nuns, and then 50,000 lower clergy, bishops, priests, things like that. So that's 115,139, give or take, people. 115,000 people at the top of the rung. Second rung is the nobility. 350,000 people. The rest of the country, including people who have more money than the nobility, merchants, businessmen, the middle class, the bourgeoisie are in here. Why was there a resolution? Why was there a revolution? Because the very, very top of this estate wanted access here. they're paying all the taxes, and they're arguably doing more for France than they are. 24.5 million people are everybody else, and that's from the poorest peasant to the richest non-noble. This is old landed money. This is history and family. And these two groups are paying no taxes. And if you think about it, the ones being affected the most are probably is the top sliver, not like that, of anybody, because they have the most revenue. Like, you can't get blood from a turnip. Broke is broke. So that's the social order. And then you see this lovely political cartoon where the first and second estate are riding comfortably on the back of the third. Political cartoons back in the 18th and 19th centuries are so impressive because they were all hand-drawn, all ink, all color, like lots of words. It was almost like a comic. There it is. They owned 20% of the land and paid no taxes, no property tax. They didn't pay any tie-up. And they owned 20% of the land. Remember, the church used to own thousands, like for a while, the Catholic Church owned a quarter of all the land in Europe was owned by the Catholic Church. And then that whole plague thing happened. Yeah. French clergy gave a 2% gift to the monarchy every year. Ooh, I hope they could survive. 2%. Which is probably from tithing that came from them. I'm speculating. I mean, don't use that as an answer, but I'm speculating. If the church is paying them and people pay the church, because churches are supposed to be nonprofit, well, today anyway. All right. The second estate was the nobility. Again, only 2 to 4% of the population. They owned 25% of the land, paid no taxes. Property tax alone could have helped Louis XVI live a little longer, could have helped France out a little bit from a revenue standpoint. If they just paid the tie-in, the property tax. And then the bottom. Somebody asked a question. Hold on. The third estate was 95% of the French population. Peasants, urban workers, middle class. Oh, someone's hand went up. What's your question?
So the second estate had more, like 5% more land. Is that just in reference to there was more people, or they just had more land because they were nobility?
Probably a little bit of both. I mean, it's impressive that the clergy is such a small group from a population perspective, but they have 20% of the land. And then this next group, which is really just 4%. 4% of the population. Isn't that what they said the second estate was? Yeah, 2 to 4% of the entire population has a quarter of all the land in France. That's a big deal. So basically 5% of France has 45% of the land. And remember, back then, land is wealth. So the real wealth from an old school perspective is land. This new wealth, this new money from burgeoning industries and from trade and from all these things that the bourgeoisie, that the middle class, that's now a new development. See, it was easy for the first and second estate to live and to exist in this way before you get to the 1700s, before exploration, and we have full-fledged colonies and people are crossing oceans and starting business ventures, and before the Industrial Revolution, which is taking place during this time period, really getting under the way during this time period. And you now have people with money wanting a voice at the table. It was easy for the first two estates to ignore the third estate. But as more and more people in the third estate start becoming vital and viable members of lots of different countries, this is what starts getting this push. Remember, the French Revolution is 1789. Our revolution ended 13 years before that. They knew we had one, obviously, because they helped us win it. They understood the people who wanted the revolution because they were similar in that they were businessmen, they were middle-class people, they wanted representation, they wanted a seat at the table, they wanted more of a say in the direction of the country. So they had a roadmap, they had a blueprint. Prior to that, it was easy for those first two estates to ignore any problems because there really was not a legitimate threat below them. And you could argue, or you could maybe postulate that they never took it as a serious threat. I don't know. I have books. I could read for the rest of my life and still never know everything. Although, man, that'd be fun to try. All right. At the Estates General, the first and second estates assumed each estate would receive just one vote. So understand this. Hopefully this next slide. Yeah, it does. All right. Okay.
I was gonna ask, I mean, wouldn't that be vastly like disproportionate?
It is. I'm going to show you the next slide. This is the suggested voting pattern. In the Estates General, there are 300 members from the first estate. There are 300 members from the second estate. There are 648 members from the third estate in the Estates General. So there's 1,248 people in their Congress, but each estate casts one vote. So one vote for 648, one vote for 300, one vote for 300. So no law, but again, when you have the power, you dictate terms. When there's nothing written, when there's no constitution, when there's no laws written to limit power, this is what happens. When laws are ignored, when there's nothing in place, or when people refuse to acknowledge the law, this is what can happen. So if there was nothing in place, they're just doing what they've always done. They're just doing what they thought was right. They're doing what they thought, the way it should be. And it goes back to why don't people know about the ocean? This is the way it's been. This is what the first estate knows. This is the family and the people with whom they've been surrounded. This is what the second estate knows. This is who they've hung around. Think about it. If Siddhartha never leaves his palace and sees the other people suffering and dying, he'd have no idea what pain is. So only through experience can we actually see what the other side is going through. That's how you go from sympathy to empathy. So it's always good when you can bring the Buddha back into a conversation. All right. Questions out there? No? Led by Abe Saez, the third estate rejected this voting method and they left in protest. They walked out. There are 648 of us. We should have more than one vote. There are more of us than both of you combined. We should have more than one vote. No way. Okay, so they left. They walked out. Fortunately for them, there was a tennis court nearby. They had to work off some steam. Led by, so what is the third estate? It is everything. What has it been in the political order up to now? Nothing. What is it asking for? To become something. All right, that's what Abe Saez was saying as the leader, as the spokesperson for the third estate. We're everything. We're 95% of France. We are France. We have been given and we're allowed to have nothing, and all we want is something. Throw us a bone. Give us something. Let us have a say in something. And the first two estates said no. So they're like, deuces, and off they went. They just bounced. Or was it, what's the word that I heard on, my son watched that stupid Outer Banks show last summer. They yeeted. Did you just yeet? Anyway, all right. That's a dumb word. Yeet's a dumb word. It just is. Yeet. It's good. Sounds like something you eat. All right. You may get pictures for documents. You may get paintings for documents at some point for a DBQ. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. This is one of my favorite paintings to show how a painting can be historical. When you're told to analyze paintings or art, What is the first thing you have to do? Anybody? What's
Do you
the
look
first
at
thing?
like the tone of the painting?
Back up. What's the first thing you have to do before you can analyze a piece of art? Or
What the
song?
painting is of, like,
Understand the historical context.
No,
Like the context of the painting.
not yet. Not yet. The first thing, and this is a wonderful analogy into test taking. I love how this is just melded into a teachable moment because I'm such a dad. You go to the museum, before you can appreciate something, what must you do?
Ask questions. about
Before that, the first thing you do,
Maybe just look at it.
look at it.
Let's go, dude.
Just look at, just take a second and take it all in. And what do you see? Don't look for symbolism or what's going on yet. When you look at a piece of art for a history, let's just say history class or an art class, because that's probably the two most likely places that you'd see a painting, just look at it. When you look at a piece of art, and unfortunately for a DBQ, because it's timed, well, you get an hour, I think. You don't have, your time is limited, but when you have limitless time, just look. And then everything else that you all said, yes, you see the painting, okay, what's going on in the painting? Who's in the painting? Then you can start going contextually. Okay, when was this painting painted? What's going on in the foreground, in the background, sorry. I don't think afterground's a word. Then you do that, but just look at it. When you get an SAQ or a multiple choice question, the first thing you do is read it. Don't read it with, I got to answer it brain. Read the words. Just take a second and read the words, because as I'm reading your SAQs, you're answering, and some of you aren't even addressing the question. You're so intent, and maybe part of that is because of the time constraint, which is why I'm going to add more time on test. Anyway, but you're reading it already trying to answer it. Just take a hot minute and read it and look at the words and look what it's asking. Then, okay, so what does this mean? What does this mean? Then go into it, but give your brain a chance to decode the words. Give your brain a chance to decode the painting. We've only had like 8 slides in the French Revolution. What's going on in this painting? What do you think is going on in this painting?
The third estate is meeting in the tennis court.
Well, you know that, but I'm just saying.
In there.
Okay, it is the third estate. This is a tennis court. That's great. But if you didn't know that, what do you see?
Who's the guy in white that's like there? He kind of looks like he would be in like the clergy rather than the third estate.
Okay, he is the clergy. And then who's he with?
People.
Are those
Who
the
do you
three leaders
suppose,
of
who
each?
do you suppose, who would make the most sense are the other two people?
The leaders of each estate.
Yeah, a representative from each estate. So that's the representatives of each estate. Behind them is the Estates General, and they are having a discussion. That's what government looks like in other parts of the world. If it was in color as opposed to this sepia, notice the two sets of windows. What do you see?
All kinds of people watching.
There's
There are
people
people
up there.
watching. What else?
One
There's, like,
side is
a pair
dark
of
and one side
wings.
is light.
One side is dark and one side is light. If you were looking at it, okay, so the side with the curtains billowing in, if it was in color, there are gray storm clouds. And it is windy and stormy and violent. And over here, the sun is out. So this is a metaphor for France. So in paintings, you can kind of get a feel for what this artist was saying. Anyway, so yes, Reed.
Oh, never mind. I was just gonna comment on the windows.
The what?
The windows up top, like when you asked
Go
the
ahead.
question. I said the same thing that
Good.
yeah.
All right. The third estate met in an indoor tennis court, took an oath to create a limited monarchy, and declared itself the National Assembly. So they've actually declared themselves a whole new government, and they just want to limit. See, notice here, just like the Reformation, just like the Articles of the Continental Congress, or the Articles of Confederation. Sorry, this isn't doing away with the king. It's just limiting the power of the king. They know how it worked in England. So they're not saying we don't want a king. They're just saying we want a king that can't ruin our lives without us saying no. So they create the National Assembly. Okay. The tennis court oath marked the beginning of the French Revolution. Notice, not one shot's fired and the revolution has begun. Revolutions are political. Revolutions are social. Revolutions are movements. It's in the word. The act of revolving. Unfortunately, it shouldn't be a revolution. Yes, Ben?
Where is this indoor tennis court? I don't think I've ever seen an indoor tennis court.
What?
Like, who has this?
Everybody did in Europe back in the day because of the weather. Because the courts were grass.
Ah, got it.
And tennis was played by wealthy people. So not a whole lot's changed, but still. There's Paris, pre the redesign, because now it doesn't look like that. The roads Paris looks like Washington, D.C. Well, actually, let me change that around. Washington, D.C. looks like Paris because the guy who redesigns the roads in Paris designed the D.C. layout. What?
How did they do all that?
They tore buildings down and made the roads wider so you couldn't set up barricades. The roads get much wider. Like the Champs-Élysées and other roads in France are wider now to make them more difficult to barricade. You'll get to. Have you not seen Les Mis? Les Miserables. The Miserable. That's the name of a play. It's a musical. My favorite musical. No? Okay.
Why would they want to not allow barricades?
We're getting there. Ben asked the same question. Louis XVI, I think.
Mr. Story.
Yep.
Les Mis is on Netflix now.
What, the musical or the movie they redid? The musical movie with Hugh Jackman or the one in the early 2000s? Okay. The musical one's pretty decent. Just understand that you're going to be seeing faces. The way it's shot is kind of weird because it's like faces. All right. Louis XVI ordered troops to surround Paris as an angry mob protested rising prices of bread. Like a quarter of their income monthly went to bread. That's how expensive it got. And bread is life. On July 14th, 1789, a mob stormed the Bastille. That's a fortress/prison, freeing prisoners and seizing supplies of gunpowder and weapons. I think there were like 7 people at most in it. So they said they were there to liberate the prisoners, but it was just an excuse to get weapons. I think they wanted to liberate them too, but it's where the weapons were, in the Bastille. So July 14th on your calendar, you'll see Bastille Day if you have like a Google Calendar with your events. It's also a song by Rush if you're into Rush. Anyway. It's taking way too long. The fall of the Bastille is an important symbolic act against royal power. Paris becomes ground zero, the epicenter of the revolution. Notice it's not capitalized here because they're just talking about the revolution, like any revolution. It's not like it's the only revolution, then you could capitalize it. If the French Revolution was the only revolution the world had ever seen, then the revolution would be capital R. All right. Liberté, égalité, fraternité. In August 1789, the National Assembly creates the Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. That's their name of their declaration. The Declaration of the Rights of Man and Citizen. Okay. All men remain free and equal in rights. That's what it says. Can you not see this? This is huge.
I could, but you're looking in the back.
Oh, well, then how do you move? All right. I don't know how wide the camera is on the computer. So, all right. And you don't have to sit there. There's 3 of you. Okay. Looks like tablets. Looks like the 10 Commandments, which is ironic since it's in France. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. Feudalism is abolished. So they abolished feudalism. These are just some of the rights. Again, men are born and remain free and equal in rights. The aim of all political association is the preservation of the natural rights of man. Liberty, property, security, and resistance to oppression. So that's not in ours, because then you couldn't have slaves. No body nor individual may exercise any authority which does not proceed directly from the nation. So, God wills it, doesn't work anymore. Liberty consists in the freedom to do everything which injures no one else. The natural rights of each man has no limits except these which assure to the other members the enjoyment of the same rights. It's the thing I said yesterday about swinging your fist. You can swing your arm all you want. You have your right. As soon as you hit somebody, you've impacted their right, you lose yours. That's how freedom of speech works. That's how it all works. You can say it, but there are consequences for saying it. Nothing may be prevented which is not forbidden by law. Law is the expression of the general will. Every citizen has a right to participate personally or through his representative in his foundation. Must be the same for all. No person shall be accused, arrested, or imprisoned except in the cases according to the forms prescribed by law. The law shall provide for such punishments only as strictly and obviously necessary. Innocent until they should be declared guilty. No one shall be disquieted on account of his opinions. That's a fancy way of saying no censorship. Every citizen may accordingly speak, write, and print with freedom, but shall be responsible for such abuses of this freedom. See? I like this. The security of the rights of man and of the citizen requires public military forces. So that allows them to continue having their professional army. And then a common contribution is essential for the maintenance of the public forces. We're going to tax you. But that's part of our rights to protect your rights. That's the whole idea of social contract. You give up some of your rights, some of your freedoms. You give up some of your freedoms to protect the greater good and the greater freedoms. All right. Moving on. Oh, and all citizens have a right to decide. In other words, if you don't have money, you can give something else instead of going to jail. Okay. And then society. Since property is an inviolable and sacred right, no one shall be deprived thereof. Okay. Oh, look. Finally. Thousands of women marched to Versailles demanding cheaper bread and insisting the royal family move to Paris. Remember, Versailles is the capital. Think about the footwear. And this is not a sexist comment. This is a historical, contextual comment. This is keeping things in context. They wore, that's the typical clothing of the day. Shoes weren't flats back then. From Paris to Versailles is 8 miles. They pulled weapons and marched in protest 16 miles round trip to order the king and queen to move back to Paris where the people are and to do their job. Yeah, women. Thousands of men marched to Versailles, demand cheaper bread. Yep, yeah. We know that. The Tuileries Palace. Yeah, and by the way, that's where he lives in Paris. That's just awful. The king surrendered and agreed to share power with the legislative assembly because he wants to be king. The royal family attempts to escape. That's true. They move to Paris. They stay in Paris. They realize this isn't going to go well. So what they do is, come on. Austria and Prussia demanded restoration of the king in France. They invaded France. Oh, wait, where'd it go? Where's the notes about that? Well, anyway, they tried to escape. They're dressed up as servants. They try to escape and they get caught. They do the old clothing switcheroo. Meanwhile, Austria and Prussia demanded restoration of the king of France, and they invaded France, hoping to stop the revolution and to get the monarch back, and in a move of self-preservation. Because if the French, again, looking at continuity and change, the America got rid of the English king. The people in France are having issue with their king. If this spreads and continues, again, the old saying that when France sneezes, Europe catches a cold. If France's monarch falls, what's going to happen to us? So they're going in to really be preemptive and say, okay, stop. Put the king back because we want to stay king too. Restoring the French monarchy is in the common interest to all. Again, it's what matters to all the sovereigns in Europe. First coalition in the Brunswick Manifesto, despite Prussian threats to destroy Paris if the royal family was harmed, foreign forces were defeated. So yay, French. They're defeating the foreign. Well, who would not? I mean, would you be afraid of that? How do you fight in that?
I mean, like 24 million people.
Well, they're not all going to fight. The middle class aren't going to fight. That's what the poor people are for. Have you paid attention to history? All right. They're the generals. The sans-culottes. The radicals called the sans-culottes, took over Paris. That means without breeches, without leggings, stockings. Sans is without. Culotte is leggings or stockings. In other words, they wore pants. They took over Paris. They executed thousands of priests, nobles, and others who supported the monarchy. It's starting to get a little out of hand. Nothing's been done about the lack of food. Nothing's been done about the tax situation. The king has tried to escape or is going to try to escape. They've been invaded by other countries. Still, nothing's been done about the tax situation and nothing's been done about the food. They're hungry. Actually, they've moved past hangry. Like they are not in a good place right now. Poor people, what's the saying? If you don't give them, if they're not heard, the only thing left is to be violent. If they have no voice. It's also a Kennedy thing. The September massacres marked the beginning of a second French Revolution dominated by radicals. So the first was the tennis court oath. This is the second, more hostile revolution dominated by radicals. There's the song. And this is just, what is this cartoonist point of view regarding the French Revolution? Yeah. This is a British cartoon. So, anyway, we can discuss that later. And what is the cartoonist bias regarding the French Revolution in this document analysis? Again, because that's a document. Art is a document. The local cartoons are a document. All right, Danton, who looks like no, he looks like the well.
No, he looks like
If the boss of what's the Monsters Incorporated? If the boss was a human. Yeah, if the boss was a human. All right. And then Robespierre, a Jenner. And then Robespierre. All right. The Jacobins, which were a radical faction in the national, led by Maximilien Robespierre, wanted to end the monarchy and create a republic. So they want to follow the American model. Get rid of the king. Let's have a republic. Let's have representation. Robespierre. Great name. Robespierre is an excellent example of irony. In 1793, the Jacobins demanded the 16th be executed as a tyrant and a traitor. The National Convention voted to execute the king. So here's our second monarch executed as a public spectacle. And there they are. And by the way, for a little bit of time, when your head's cut off, you're still alive. So when your head's cut off, when they lift up his head, he may have been able to see people cheering his death as the last thing that ever entered his head. Because what kills everybody in a medical sense is lack of oxygen to the brain. That's why we die. Heart stops beating, you don't get oxygen, so you die. It's not your heart not beating, it's no oxygen going to the brain. All right. Oh, fancy.
Or it's no.
The kings of Europe would dare challenge us, we throw them the head of a king. There you go. Danton. But don't mess with us, man. You'll lose your head too. Now, this is really going to have the monarchs and the rest of Europe freaked out. Britain, Spain, the Netherlands, and Sardinia, that's the orange part of what will be Italy, joined Austria and Prussia to form the first coalition to stop the French Revolution. Here's one of those instances where people who wouldn't be friends come together to stop a bigger threat. Looking at you, Soviet Union. In World War II. What? Nothing. The United States and the Soviet Union do not like each other, but Hitler was worse. So for 4 years, we just dealt with the smell, and that's the figure of speech. And we worked with the Russians to take care of Hitler. All right. And then Patton wanted to go on and take care of the Russians. The convention created the Committee of Public Safety, and their whole purpose was to protect the revolution from threats, foreign and domestic. So this is like your spy ring. This is where the French Revolution gets a little paranoid. And this tends to happen when a radical element, you have to have an enemy, and if you're not with us, you're against us. Even if you're not against us, you're the enemy. So either you're with us or you're wrong. It's kind of like Facebook. Agree with me or you're wrong. Led by Robespierre, the committee exercised dictatorial powers as it carried out a reign of terror. It is capitalized because that is what his reign and his rule of France was known as, because he had this lovely little tool, guillotine. Liberty cannot be served until criminals lose their heads. If that's your motto, you know it's not going to end well. Terror is nothing other than justice, prompt, severe, and inflexible. Man. All right, there it is, the guillotine. Hoping to create a republic of virtue, he executed the queen, his chief rivals, and thousands of enemies of the revolution. And as is often the case, a good number of these people were not actual threats. Not sure, much as I loathe that phrase. Yeah. It's sort of like, the purge, which actually scares me. 300,000 people were arrested. 300,000. Now, granted, that's basically all the Second Estate. Or close to it. 16 to 50,000 French citizens were executed during Robespierre's reign. Robespierre's reign. And, oh wait, is that it? Okay. By the way, the guillotine was invented as a way to humanely kill people because it's quick. But they got used so much that on the way down it might stop. Imagine that. They release it, it's like, they're going to pull up and do it again. Or, no. It doesn't make it all the way down. Like the Tower of Terror, it falls, but not all the way. So you're expecting
right before. You're just like bracing yourself.
Yeah, you're bracing yourself. Yeah, you're like, oh, I need new pants. Or it gets used so many times. This happened a lot that it didn't go all the way through.
You still die.
But then they have to raise it. The head's got to come off. Right, and then you got to raise it and do it again. All right.
They'd be alive the whole time.
The committee issued the levée en masse, establishing compulsory military service for men ages 18 to 40. This is a draft. This is conscription. Levée en masse. Yes.
People live to 40, like
yeah,
on average to 40.
Yeah. People are living way past 40 now because we don't have plague and we know where the bad water is and we have more food.
But there wasn't.
There wasn't Britain. Not if you're poor.
Yeah.
Yes, they're living. This is just, yes, they're fine. And this is Uruguay. They're fine. All right? Yes, they're living past 40. What with motivated troops and talented young officers like Napoleon, the French defeated the first coalition's professional armies. This is actually one of those things that helps spur nationalism. Look at this little plucky bunch of upstarts, non-professional, blah, 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 went up against an army of 6 nations. Boom, 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 boom. A 7-nation army, I know, but still. And again, it seems, and with the exception of the guillotine, it's analogous in a way. There are similarities that you should see between the American Revolution and the French Revolution. And there are differences. Holy cow, it sounds like an AP class. Come on, there we go. The Committee of Public Safety successfully crushed internal dissent, defeated the first coalition, but continued the terror. So most of the people who might have been a threat inside France and outside France were dealt with. I guess now it just felt good.
Outside.
Countries outside of France. The first coalition were outside countries. Those 6 countries made an army and invaded France.
Yeah.
That's a threat from outside France.
Oh, but they actually went into the other country and chopped up.
No. Ben, the guillotine was for French citizens. Yeah, if you weren't French, you weren't good enough for that because they're French.
So it's like fire.
It's just instead of being hanged, you were guillotined. I'm sure they still hanged. No, they fought other armies from other countries.
And they would take the general to the
No, Ben. The guillotine only for French citizens.
Yeah, hang on.
No, the guillotine, French citizens.
Yeah.
The army's bullets, bayonets. The guillotine has nothing to do with the armies. It's army fighting army.
I know, but like you said, they defeated outside threat.
Yes, the armies come from outside France. They're not French soldiers. They're English soldiers, Dutch soldiers, Prussian soldiers. That's outside France.
They went to the other country and got rid of the people who sent armies.
No. No, I never. Okay, if that's how that came out, I'm sorry, but no. Okay.
No, that's not.
Okay, that's all right. Okay, and then this just shows you different revolutions and uprisings, areas of insurrections where they were rising up against. This is the internal threat, rising up against the revolution. So again, just like the American Revolution, most Southerners did not want to leave England. Up to 450 to 800,000 civilians living in the Vendée, which is, I believe, that area over there on the right, left, the west coast, were believed to be killed. Notre Dame. De-Christianization efforts increased, the adoption of the Republican calendar, for example. But in rural areas where people are less educated, where people are more traditional, that is not a slap in the face of rural areas. It's just there aren't schools there. And schooling is different, and resources go to different things. Most rural parts of any country are usually more conservative. Because if we're talking about eyes and lenses, their experiences are less and they're more narrow. So what they know is what they know. It is not right. It is not wrong. It is what they know. How you handle it is what's right and what's wrong. And this calendar is crazy. The Catholic Church was linked with either real or potential counter-revolutions, so there were issues with the Catholic Church. Religion was associated with the Ancien Regime and superstitious practices. In other words, religion was tied to the old ways and those regimes that got us in this mess. And religion was superstitious to some members of the Enlightenment. And this was very popular thinking among the sans-culottes, among the educated middle class, among the city dwellers, that part of our problem is religion. Therefore, religion had no place in a rational, secular, which means of the world, republic. So this is going from one extreme to the other. There is no moderation here, which is equally troublesome. Hard left is just as unpopular as hard right. This is the Republican calendar. Year one is 1792. So their calendar begins in 1792. So if we were still using the Republican calendar, if anybody wants to figure out what year we'd be in, well, 1992 is 200. 10, 20, 28.
229, right?
All right. Well, that's class. We're a little behind. Okay. Pick up with the Republican calendar. I'm sure it's like 3 or 4 slides left because we did not get to the fall of Robespierre, just the rise. It's the same lunch. Get your lunches. I'll see you tomorrow. If you have any questions, send them to me. Thanks. I didn't realize it was this long. Have a good day.
Thank you. Have a good day.